We doing it? We doing it?
I'm trying to get
Is it happening?
I was trying to get the sun out of my eyes.
You don't want the sun directly in your eyes for this podcast?
No. At the wedding, What?
Okay, you have about 12 inches of like shade in between sun.
I know.
And side of your face.
I know. It's because I'm using the little door frame.
Yeah, you can't move.
At the wedding we were at on Saturday, there was like lights, to light the area, and one was pointing right in my face, and like throughout dinner I got a headache. And my friend Melissa took her napkin and like draped it over the like candelabra, which had fake like candlesticks on it. And she like draped it over and made like a shade over my face.
A shield for your eye.
Yes, and I was just like,
that's hilarious.
Do
you remember being in any kind of like a concert or like a show where there's like the laser situation and then it'll go perfectly so it's shining right into your retina?
Yeah.
Like
it freaks me out. I'm like, there it is. I'm going blind.
That's it. That's the end of my sight.
Bye, everyone. I went blind at a Radiohead concert or a Sigur Rós concert, really.
Worth it.
Yes. That was the craziest light show I've ever seen, was at a Sigur Rós one. It was in Asheville. Did you go with me?
I know I've seen them here in Asheville. I wonder.
Did we go together? Do we remember?
Do we remember our life back then?
Do we? You went with me to see Dave Chappelle, right?
Oh, yes.
Didn't you?
Yeah. Well, I know I went. Were we with each other?
I remember someone texted me and was like, yo, Dave Chappelle's at the Vault, which was one of my spots.
That was your spot.
It really was, wasn't it? Oh, man, I spent so much time at the Vault. I've eaten so many of their burgers. It's probably
so many burgers.
So many Vault burgers.
Shout out to the Vault on Rankin.
Yes. So many of their slushies in the summer. Those were dangerous.
Boozy slushies.
Did not need those. Could have done without. Oh, man. I miss Asheville. I miss the summers.
Yeah.
It's so pretty there. Yeah.
It is pretty in the summer. We're in the gray right now, which is
don't miss
hard.
The winters.
Yeah, because it's like, it's one thing to like have an actual winter where it's like cold and it's snowy, or it's like actual winter. Because then you're like, you're doing the winter thing, but it gets just kind of mushy and gray here.
Yeah. I will say though, when I was mountain biking, it was fine because I could mountain bike all year. So I just like had the gear and I would go like mountain biking. And when you're like moving your body, it's fine. Like you're not. Because once it snows, you can't mountain bike. You could, but fuck that. Some people did. I was like, nah, that's like where I draw the line. I'm not a crazy person.
I'm not a crazy person.
I only will mountain bike if it's like below freezing and muddy, but not if there's snow. Not insane.
Boundaries. You have to have boundaries.
You have to have boundaries. You have to have some self-respect. No, I'm just kidding. Oh, man. So I've been thinking about one of the things that I just like adore about how we've impacted each other, or how you've impacted me. I mean, that's what I think about more. I don't really walk around thinking about how I impacted you.
Well, I think it goes both ways.
Well, yeah.
It does go both ways.
I know, but that's not what I think about, right?
Sure. Okay.
And I kind of have been thinking a lot about, you are just so much more of what I call kind of like a mystic. And we've talked about this, but we usually talk about it how you're like, you're floating and you're in the air. Wait, by the way, remember you sent me this video? It's like some obscure like art video. You know, this
like a dance. It was like a dance art video.
And I love that video because, so it's like people dancing, but they're kind of also like tumbling through the air, and they're like running through like fields, like beautiful meadows, but like they're like kind of like jump. I feel like everybody has had dreams where you do this, where you like jump and then you get like a big jump and you catch like, and you like float, you're like flying and then you come back down and you have to like jump again, but they're like dancing, tumbling. And you sent me that video and I was like, this is what you like wish you were. Yeah. Like, this is what you're trying to achieve.
It's so good. It's so good. There's actually a Sigur Rós music video where they do the same thing.
Oh,
like they
I know what
like
you're talking about.
They march up this like hill, these kids, and then they start flying. Yeah. I love it.
So anyway, random tangent, but kind of not. I think of you a little bit as like this mystic because we'll be having conversations and you bring my attention to things that I would never explore, like past lives, human design. Like, what was the conversation we were having where you were like, well, I just been reading this book about past lives and and I'm sure that you and like this important
no,
person.
I've been reading this book and it's about this idea of soul groupings and reincarnation and like, and I like kept going. You're like, wait. Can we go rewind to what you said there? Can you like define that a little bit more?
Because I was talking about like a interaction with somebody in my life. I don't even remember who it was. Maybe like a sister or something. And you were like, well, there's this idea of soul groupings and that you chose each other and you've had experiences in past lives. And then you just use that to inform your advice to me. And I was like, hold on. What the
Get a little bit more context.
are you talking about? But I loved it when you went into it. Anyway, so do you want to tell us a little bit about past lives and soul groupings? Because I would love to hear it.
Oh God. I mean, I think I'd like to maybe start with like what, because I've been thinking about this idea. What, you want me to talk about past lives?
A little bit.
Now?
Come on. Well, just to complete the story.
Okay. Well, there's this book called Many Lives, Many Masters.
Okay.
And like when my whole kind of life fell apart this year, that's the book I read. I was just like, for whatever reason, I found the most comfort in the idea that we have many lives to live. And I wasn't just having this one fucked up life, you know, but that I've got more chances, I guess. And that book is actually, it's like a pretty groundbreaking in the world of psychology because this man was a very respected professional in his field. And the book is almost like his journal. But it's essentially like him discovering he was doing regression therapy on a patient to try to get her, because she was having so many symptoms that he could not figure out like where these like crippling anxiety and these like awful fear symptoms were coming from. And so he was trying to get her to regress to remember. He was hoping that she would remember something from her childhood that she had repressed. But what happened was she regressed to a past life of hers in which she experienced trauma in which in this lifetime she was still suffering from. And the book is this whole like exploration. And I love it because he talks about like how nervous he is to talk to his colleagues about this, like, because it was such like an out of the box idea. But anyway, like, and that brought me so much comfort, I think, because especially coming from this like fundamental Christian viewpoint of like, you've got this one shot, this one chance to make God happy or else you're going to go to hell, you know?
I just immediately heard Eminem's song.
I did
you got
too,
one
though.
shot. You got
one opportunity.
Shot, one opportunity. It was like, Mom, spaghetti. Sorry, I couldn't help it. You just like literally were like reciting Eminem lyrics unintentionally.
I should have just gone into that. I should have done it.
It's like, you got one shot. One
and I
opportunity.
really just believed you had one shot, one opportunity, and you were going to lose yourself in the music in the moment. You better never let it go.
What if you did that and I like didn't? Gosh, I'm so bummed because I wish you had done that and then I like caught on and I just like kept going with it and we're just sitting here.
We're gonna
next
get
thing
that
we know,
good. We're gonna get that good at podcasting.
I think it's more like mind reading. I don't know.
We're gonna get that good at mind reading. Too.
Yes, for sure. That's what I'm really hoping for, is to be that good at mind reading with you.
Oh, fucking love it.
Okay, yes, sorry.
So yeah, our one shot.
Yeah. I know that was a little bit, starting with a little bit of a story, I think, to paint a picture of how our conversations often look, where you explore things like this. Yeah. And I am more open to it than I ever have been in my life. But when I first met you, I for sure was not. I come from a science background. I went to school in science. My only real jobs were in the science field and research. So all of that stuff seemed like not an option to like even entertain if you were like a respectable science-minded human.
Totally.
But the point of like bringing this all up is because as I've been more open to it, even like in a lighthearted way, I just think that like life has gotten better. And I've talked about this before, especially with Ben, because it's something I like really love and adore about you, is that we'll be having a really like, you know, conversation about like life struggle, and you'll just be like, well, soul groupings. I don't even I don't even have the like enough of the vocabulary to like imitate the shit you say.
You'll get there.
I'm trying. I just like soul groupings. I'm like awkward.
I know. It's so funny because I remember early on in our relationship, because like I remember I would suggest something and I would always get these like hysterical reactions from you, right? Like,
yeah.
In the very beginning, it started with me just like, I think I like bought you like a crystal or something.
Yeah.
And I was like, the vibration of this crystal is like connected to your sense of personal power. And I think this would be like really good for you in your life right now, or whatever it was. And honestly, like I have seen you like open yourself up to it more and more. And also I think it helps because I'm not like dogmatic at all. I actually don't really subscribe to any of this shit, but I find it really fucking fascinating. Mm-hmm. And I've seen it benefit my life. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to like, you know, and it's really interesting to me. So I just keep digging in. It also feels kind of taboo to me because of how I grew up.
Oh,
and
yeah,
like astrology and like all this stuff was like the devil. You know what I mean? And so that's where it starts. It starts with like looking at your zodiac sign. Like that's where it started for me.
Buying a few crystals.
It felt really rebellious. Like it felt really rebellious to me to be doing that because that was all so demonized all growing up.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I don't remember any like church opinions on that stuff. So that's interesting to me. Yeah.
My whole life is church opinions.
So it makes sense that it felt rebellious. My whole life is church opinions.
My whole childhood.
It makes sense that feels rebellious. I think we should also say that like we're talking about all like, I don't know, astrology, human design, crystals.
Like metaphysical things.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Because it's just such an area where we're so, I don't know, we're just so different, but I fucking love it. Because you do use it to like bring in new ways of looking at things. Even if it's not like something you feel like you're an expert in or something like that. Like, I kind of don't know if that's the point. I mean,
not for me, at least. Yeah.
Right. Like, only a very few people are really going to want to spend their life like just in astrology or just in human design. Like, that seems very niche to me.
Right.
And like,
totally.
I don't know. But I don't know. I think a lot of people can relate because this whole like, the whole metaphysical exploration is becoming more like socially accepted, and people are changing their lives to be more like openly accepting of it, or you know what I mean?
I agree. I feel like almost where science is going and where like mysticism, in some areas they seem to be moving closer to each other. Like, and that's what I think I loved about Joe Dispenza's book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, because he essentially scientifically shows, like gives an example of manifestation. How do you manifest? How do you change your life? But he like shows it with science and with the science. I think that's why it was so like appealing to you. And he shows how like the way you think creates your reality and proves all of that. When that is like an understanding in, I think, like more metaphysical mysticism, and it maybe seemed forever like to be more witchy and more, you know, whatever. But now it seems like, it is becoming more mainstream or whatever. And that's like exciting.
So for me, have you read Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton?
I have not.
Oh.
No, we've talked about it a bunch.
Okay, so because that was like a book that I read pre-you that kind of like changed. That I don't know why I'm saying kind of, like definitely changed my life, because he was like a cellular biologist, and so honestly, the book is hard to read for a lot of people, I think, because it's so like based in science. But he basically like goes through how belief affects biology. And so like how the mind can like change like what's going on in like a cellular level. It was like one of the books I read that I was like, made me not want to go to medical school, honestly. Because I have always had a frustration with how science limits itself with its own like arrogance. And I really think that its reductionist way of looking at things creates blind spots for itself. And it's not everyone. There are some people who are like, I'm just talking obviously in like stereotypes. And so that's something that like has always been something I've struggled with, because people who are like heavily science minded have a really hard time remembering that things always change in the world of science, and that we always learn and discover new things, and that there are things we don't know, and accepting that like what we know today might not be what we know tomorrow. And I think that's like a big, big limitation of people who limit themselves to that way of thinking, because then they're not they're not open. They're not open to like the unknowns. And that has been my big lesson with you, is that when I'm more open to things outside of my understanding and open to things that can't be explained, that is so important, I think. I genuinely believe it's made my life better. Allowing space for things that cannot like be explained by science.
What do you feel like that, because it makes sense that maybe challenges that way of thinking of like that closed offness, like unless you can prove it. And I feel like we've talked about this, like unless you can prove it, I can't, it's not part of, it can't be part of anything. And opening yourself up to the things you can't explain. Can you tell me more about that, or like how you see that in your life? Okay.
Manifesting is a great one. So I tend to believe that if you believe crystals are going to bring you XYZ, they're going to probably highlight that thing in your life for you because of your beliefs. Like I really just believe it's like your brain.
Placebo. Yeah.
Yeah. Placebo, basically. Like it's your brain paying attention. So I'm like down with crystals, but I think that my interpretation of how they work is much different. I'm just like, if you like really believe this crystal is going to bring you whatever into your life, it's going to, because you believe it. So go for it. Anyway, so manifesting is a good idea, because I really struggled with the concept of manifesting, because and I think it's probably like both of these are right, but I actually believe it's like, so the reticular activating system is a part of your brain that like notices patterns. And if you are every day doing what is supposed to be done to like quote unquote manifest, which is like being intentional, thinking about the thing that you want, taking steps even in the right direction, putting the energy out into whatever, the universe, the field. I actually believe in part you're increasing your awareness to things that are in alignment with what will help get you to whatever that thing is. And I think that people mistake that for manifesting, but then there's a part of me, I also went through the whole thing where I'm like, well, if somebody's like quote unquote mistaking that for manifesting, like who cares? Like who am I to sit here and try and like, I don't really care to like argue with people about like the nuances of that. Like if they believe that they brought that into their life through strictly like bringing it closer to them in the energetic field, whatever, so be it. Like the whole concept behind what you do to manifest, I think is great. So I don't know. I just don't feel the need to like argue about the nitty gritty, but what's happened is as I've been more open to the idea of manifesting, i.e. like truly energetically bringing the world in which like something happens in your life closer to you, because that's the thing in Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, right? And a lot of Joe Dispenza's work is he's like, if you do this work and then you see something come alive in your life that you've like started with in your mind, then you believe in it, and your belief in it becomes stronger, and your ability to do it becomes stronger, and on and on and on. And so I also got to a point where I was like, look, the only thing holding me back from being like down to try this out is like my ego, right? The part of me that thinks it's maybe a little silly or ridiculous, or like doesn't line up with like the part of me that tries to be a scientist or appear like a scientist, right? And as I've started like trying to like let that go and not care to be right or look smart or whatever, and I've like allowed for manifesting, I mean, huge crazy, I've told you like crazy stories where I'm like, I've literally been like, I want to meet this author of this book. He lives in my town. And then I met him on a plane, and we like literally stood in the back and like had a conversation, and I was like, whoa. And he wasn't who I thought he was. And I was like, oh, no thanks. But
that kind of stuff has happened like multiple times for you, especially like around meeting people. You'll be like, I want to meet somebody cool as shit, like like now or whatever, or tomorrow,
like a specific
or whatever.
person.
And you've done it with specific people. You've done it with strangers too, like many times. You're like, I want to meet somebody really awesome. Like just when you went to Joshua Tree or whatever.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about that.
That cool girl. And you did it all when you were traveling through Europe.
I was like in Zion. I was in Zion and I was
Zion.
I was in Zion and I was like, I want to meet someone awesome to go hiking with tomorrow because I didn't want to go hiking in Zion in the middle of the summer, which is like kind of dangerous by myself. And I walked in and like sat down, and then this girl, she sits down, she lives in LA. She's like super into like manifesting and crystal. She has a crystal business. And I told her that that's what I wanted, and I like put it out, and she was like, oh my gosh, well, I was going to leave tonight, but I guess we should go hiking tomorrow. And then we went hiking.
I love it. I love it.
Oh, yeah. No, it is. It's true. Like anytime that's like, but like also specific things. So then I've been trying to get Ben on board because I'm like, look, the only thing, because he's very resistant to it, right? Because he's super, I just feel like it's also like traditionally like feminine, like women tend to be like more open to this stuff. And then men are like, no. And then I like finally got through to him around the idea of like considering it because I was like, literally, like what harm does it cause? And what potential does it like open you up to? Like there's no reason to not just like give it a whirl and see what happens. And then he did this thing. Well, one, he actually was like, did we manifest our house? Because that whole story. And then he did this thing actually where I was doing this launch and I was like, he was like, I'm going to do it with how many like courses you sell by the end of like Tuesday or something. And he literally named a very specific number. And I was like, I've never sold that many ever. Like it's so unrealistic. And he was like, okay, well, this is perfect then. And then I like sold that many. And then I was like, Ben, we like broke a record today. And it was exactly the number you chose. And he was like, whoa, that's crazy. We went to sleep. And the next morning there was one more sale. And I was like, oh my God, there was one more sale last night. And he was like, okay, that's really weird. Because as we were falling asleep at like 11 p.m., I was like, I'm going to manifest one more. And then the sale came in at like 11 p.m. And I was like, what the fuck? And he was like, okay, that's weird. And obviously he's still like, you know, but it's just the whole thing has been hilarious. And it also feels very playful, right? If you're like, and I've heard that that's like how it needs to be, like for it to be successful. It's like more lighthearted, more playful, things like that. I don't know. So it's just been very interesting to see how all of it's like affected our lives. I don't know. It's a change.
Yeah. I love it. I don't know. And I think for me, like, especially like in my friendship with you, I think it's really helpful to have the areas in which we do contrast each other, but also like having your openness to hearing about like what I'm talking about and asking questions about it. I think it's really good for me to stay like, to feel a little bit more grounded, a little bit more rooted and not like launched off into the ether.
But I like when you're launched off into the ether. That's when I hear the wild ideas.
Yeah. I feel like it all came for me like, so all growing up, I was Christianity is inherently very like rooted in mysticism. It's all of these, like the belief systems are all magic and coming back to life and the Holy Spirit and healing people. It's all magic. And there's a comfort and a familiarity that I have with it all in its like core form of like things bigger than us, like energy bigger than like what we can sense with our senses. And I don't know, like growing up, I mean, I remember there was a season in my life that my mom got involved with a Pentecostal church. And those are the churches that they do like the speaking in tongues. And it's like it's very like magical, mystical. And I remember being like really involved in those things and having some pretty intense, like kind of crazy experiences. I'm not sure why I was having them because I was so young, like just experiences in which all the adults were like focused on me. It was very intense, like in their like praying and like wanting me to like essentially wanting me to like channel God, like the word of God. Yeah.
Whoa.
Like this was like, 14. This is what I was doing. And I'm just trying to be like a good Christian and make my mom proud. So I was like down for whatever, you know? I'm just here to make my mom proud.
Whoa, that's so intense.
So definitely had some really interesting experiences. And when I look back on them, I do feel a little like uncomfortable just because.
I can tell, yeah.
Just because like it would have been different if I was like an adult, but I was like a child and they were like pouring oil on my head and like saying that I was like the representation of like this generation of like young people and asking me to like channel the Holy Spirit and stuff like this. So it was like a lot. And yeah, like on like stage, like in front of people, like in front of thousands of people, like doing stuff. It just was like, there was like, yeah, the stuff. It was wild.
Oh my gosh. Emily,
Sarah's just mouth is open, just so everybody knows.
I'm like, what?
I don't talk about this stuff because I don't really understand.
It's making you uncomfortable.
I'm uncomfortable.
You seem uncomfortable.
I'm uncomfortable.
Do you want to talk about something else? How about human design?
No, the whole reason why I was like talking about that is I felt like I needed to explain how rooted I felt like I was in this like magical mysticism in that version of it.
Uh-huh.
And then when I deconstructed my faith, I was very dramatic about it and I threw the baby out with the bathwater. I was just like, when that thread was pulled that I felt like I was lied to in one area, I just assumed I was lied to everywhere. And then everything got thrown out.
That's common.
And
I
that's
think.
That's like
a
I mean,
normal
I think
human reaction. It makes so
it was
much
like
sense.
a survival thing. I was like, this is all lies and I need to throw it out. And so it was a couple years. And I remember I experimented with like nihilism. I was just like, everything's meaningless. Like that was like an important phase. I was like, none of this means anything. I'm like a mom. I've got like 2 toddlers. I'm like, this is all meaningless. I was just like, it was
Oh
a
no.
time.
Oh no.
But
it's so funny because
like
I'm sure you didn't stay there very long. I know you.
No, I got real sad. I got depressed.
Yeah. And you're like, wait a second. This sucks.
But I think I needed to go there
For
because up until that point, everything was assigned so much meaning. And I needed to have a period of my life where everything was meaningless so that I could choose to assign meaning to my life instead of it just being whatever I was defaulted and handed to me. But I guess the point I'm getting at is I read this book called The Dance of the Dissident Daughter by Sue Monk Kidd. And it's an autobiography essentially of a woman deconstructing her faith.
Wait, I think I've read a book by her. Doesn't she write like stories about Jesus?
Uh-huh.
Oh yeah,
because she was a Christian author.
The Longings by her is amazing.
Oh, interesting.
Sorry,
she's a
anyway,
phenomenal writer.
She's an incredible
so this is like her
writer. Oh my gosh.
This is her like autobiography about this. And what it helped me remember. I mean, I wept through the whole book. What it like stirred in me was remembering the part of me, the like spiritual part of me that connected to the idea of God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit and things bigger than me and energy that connects us all, that there's like a very true, real part of me that is spiritual and is mystical. And it was defined for me, right? As a child, like I was told what it was. And then when I threw that out, along with my faith, I guess, or those belief systems that I didn't subscribe to anymore, I felt like I was missing a piece of me. I felt I was sad. Like, and I realized that it was like the spiritual part of me. And so after reading that book, I wanted to reclaim these parts of me that I kind of had thrown away. I wanted to define it for me instead of having a faith define it. And that's where I started going on this journey of like what I mentioned earlier, where it felt really taboo to like look at my astrology, you know, or look at metaphysical stuff or crystals or whatever. But I just slowly started piecing together things that felt good to me. And I made a promise to myself that I was never going to ever like subscribe to something like wholeheartedly ever again. That's like, because I was like, I can't do that because there's just human error. And I like cannot like subscribe wholeheartedly to anything. But I will take parts of things that feel really good to me and I'll add them to my palette. You know, it's kind of like how I pictured it is I've got this beautiful blank canvas and I'm going to start putting color up there. And okay, crystals feel really good. And the reasons crystals feel good is because they represent the chakra system, different energy points in your body, which essentially are just highlighting parts of what make up a human, like your sense of security, your root chakra, your personal power, you know what I mean? Your sacral energy, you know, and all these things are things that every single one of us can identify with, every single one of us experience. But for me, holding a crystal and getting to think about my solar plexus and my sense of personal power helped me connect to a part of me with clarity that I had never connected to before. And so that citrine or whatever I was holding just represented clarity for me. It represented this connection where I was using something to represent something a little bit more abstract, but it helped me crystallize and clarify it. And every step of the way, everything I've like added to my palette, my palette of mysticism, if you will.
I feel like you're reluctant to have this like label almost. That's what I'm like noticing in this conversation.
I think I'm reluctant to have any label.
Yeah. Okay.
Plus, I'm an Enneagram 4. Like, it's literally like, don't label me.
Yeah.
I'm the individualist. Like,
don't call me that. I know. It's funny because I didn't know that until we had a conversation in which I'm like trying to label you the mystic. I mean, I'm not trying to, but like that's kind of how it's going. And I'm seeing the like, you're like, I don't subscribe to any of that. I'm like, okay, but you've taught me so much about like human design and like astrology, like more than anyone I know, but okay.
I know. And maybe it's a protector. I mean, maybe it's like a protective mechanism that's like, you don't want to like subscribe wholeheartedly to anything or attach your identity to anything in case you're being fooled.
Oh, wow.
Maybe it's that.
Wow, in case you're being fooled.
Because I was fooled for the majority of my life. And so there's a pretty big fucking protector out that's like...
That's so interesting. That makes a lot of sense. Because I've never seen your resistance around this area until I tried to like label you as something. And now I'm like, whoa, she's got like big full, like, no, thank you. I am not, like, I don't subscribe to any of this. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah, but I think like conceptually, like in more of a like a romantic way, I like that is the mystical artist would be the label I would choose for myself. Like I feel like that would be like the more accurate way to describe me because that is how I move through the world, you know? Right. And that those are the things that interest me.
Yeah. You definitely gravitate towards them and you've like shown me so much. You know, and I love hearing about it from you. I really do. Like that time when with the past lives thing, we were talking about that. And then you always tell the funny story of you're like, you have to read this book. And I was like, yeah, I'm never going to read that book, but I am going to listen to you talk about it. Tell me more.
And then I'm always in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, we're going to loop back here in like a year. I'm going to suggest this book again.
You're playing the long game.
I play the long game.
It's working. I've slowly like opened my eyes. Well, okay. I'll tell a story that I also think really allowed me to be more open to things along these lines. Yes,
I know what this story is so powerful.
This story, okay, so when I was graduating high school and my older sister was graduating college, we were having a joint party, like a graduation party. So it was like literally like just like this huge, I don't know. I just remember we were like all getting ready for this huge party at our parents' house, and her best friend had cystic fibrosis. So she was like often in and out of the hospital. Cystic fibrosis, you don't generally live past like your 30s, your mid 30s. It's a lung like condition. Anyway, she was in the hospital. So this is not uncommon for her to have been in the hospital. And we had heard that she was going to get out of the hospital and she was going to even make it to the party. Like she was doing great. She's going to make it to the party. This is the last I'd heard about literally my sister's best friend, like soulmate friend. And I'll never forget it. I was at a Starbucks with my friend Elliot. We were like sitting there. And all of a sudden, I just felt just like a wave of something like wash over me. And I can like still like feel it if I think about it. Like right now, I can like conjure up like how that felt. And I just was like, it was like a knowing. And I just looked at Elliot and I was like, oh my God, Paige died. And he was like, no. And this is like, also, I don't even remember like cell phones. I think we're like, they were like the little Nokia ones. It wasn't like we were constant communication like we are now. And he was like, no, she's getting out and she's coming like to the party tomorrow. We like just heard that. And I was like, no, I need to go home right now. And I just was like bawling. And Elliot was like, you've lost your mind. Like, what is happening? But I actually think it came to a point where he got real quiet and was like, whoa, something's like happening. I just walked in the door of my house and my sister was like lying on the ground with both of my parents on top of her, just like bawling. And I just like that. It was like honestly one of the saddest, hardest, worst like days of my life. That like whole experience, when I started hearing about being connected to people energetically and having cords that like where you're tied to people and you can feel them like across like
space-time.
Yeah. When I like read that, I mean, without that experience, I would have been like, that's ridiculous. But like that experience, it made me so much more open to stuff like that because I was like, I think I've experienced that actually. And there have been times where I feel like because I'm more open to it and aware of it, I think I've experienced it in smaller ways, especially with Ben, actually. Like when I was on that trip, there were times where I'm like sure he like felt me because he would like call and be like, is everything okay? And I would be like, how do you know? Like you're so sensitive to like me. I don't know. So that situation in my life is like literally one of the most profound like things that's ever happened to me. And it made me think that I actually didn't tell my sister that story. She didn't know that story until like a year ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I told her like a year ago. We both just sat there and like bawled. We were like, she was like, I had never heard that story before. And I don't know. I don't know. I didn't know she didn't know it, but yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. I think it's like, it is so powerful, like this energy that connects us and this other thing outside of our senses that we can't really define. But I mean, and we even do this. Like it was just like last week, you're like, hey, true. I'm feeling you. Hey, I'm just like really feeling you right now. Is everything okay? And it was, you literally texted me like while I was like crying on my bed. And I'm like,
I do feel you actually. Yeah. Oh, and it's funny because it's only in the last year or so where I felt comfortable just reaching out and being like, I feel like I can feel that like you're struggling or not like doing well. It's crazy.
Yeah. I don't know. There's stuff like that like I can't explain. Like I'll have dreams about people that I haven't talked to in years. And usually like a lot of my dreams are just like chaos nonsense. But every once in a while I'll have one where it is so specific and intentional that I like pay attention to. One in particular was a friend that I hadn't talked to in years, and my dream self, I like broke the fourth wall or whatever in my dream, where my dream self was like talking to my sleeping self.
Whoa.
And was like, you need to remember this when you wake up because you need to call her.
Whoa.
Like I was saying this to myself. And I remember I woke up and what I was like telling my friend was like something pretty intense. Like it was like something really intense about like her relationship and like stuff that I really had no business really like talking to her about. But I remember I was like, there's no way I'm calling her to say this stuff. Like, this is like, I'm not going to blast in out of nowhere after years and like say all this stuff. But I felt like sick to my stomach.
Oh my God.
Like I was like withholding something important. And eventually what I did was I just like wrote a long like Facebook message or text message or whatever I did. And just said, hey, I had this dream. I've tried to shove it away for like a couple days now and it's not working. So if this resonates, good. If it doesn't, just disregard, you know? And I wrote her this thing and it touched a whole chord like with her and in her life that I knew nothing about what was happening, but she was like going through like some really intense stuff with her relationship. And it was like, whoa, there was like this reminder coming from the outside. And I just like, so I try to respect this part of me, like that part, that knowing that you had. It's like we all possess this sensitivity, this like sensitivity to a frequency that we don't quite know what it is, but it's an intelligence that we can't really explain. It's this knowing. And I try to really to listen to that because sometimes it's like, and it can be something really, really simple. Like, I'll never forget one time I was at the playground with my girls when they were really little, like 2 and 3.5. And I remember I was so exhausted because it just like that time is really hard when you have kids that age. And this woman came up to me and she was just like, hey, I don't mean to bother you, but I just feel like I need to say, like, hang in there. You've got like another like 2 years of hard, but then your kids are going to start playing with each other and it's going to be a lot easier. And she didn't need to like, you know what I mean? Say that or do that. But I still remember that because I was like, I believe you. I'm going to cling to that. And it was right. It was true. And that urge, whatever that little urge is, that's like, go do that, go say that, go into that store, go talk to that person, go, like, it's this little knowing that I've been trying to, over the years, practice listening to and noticing and following through with that because it creates a lot of connection. I've seen healing that has happened from it. And I don't know what it is, but yeah, it's that little urge that you feel like down in your gut or in your chest.
It's so important. It's interesting because I feel like, since I've really known you and we've talked about this stuff, I've also tried to listen to it more. And that's why it's interesting because I've definitely like felt you other times and not reached out to you because I definitely have the tendency of like people will reach out if they want you like there. And I've had to push back on that because it's true. It's like something I really actually believe it's something you can like cultivate a sensitivity to and an awareness of, right?
And you build trust. You build trust of that part of you. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just simple things like reaching out to that person that like keeps popping into your mind throughout the day. Little things like that. Talking to strangers is one. Like I'm like, there is this sensation that I've experienced and it's something I've spent my whole life like squashing and I've been trying to like not anymore. Where I feel like it's always in my chest where it's like I feel like I have to like say something to someone. And actually it happened in this like mastermind that I was in last week where this guy was talking and most of the other people giving him advice were other guys and I was just sitting there listening like, oh my gosh. This is like the blind leading the blind. Because he was talking about like feeling like deep loneliness. He was actually like having like a full-blown existential crisis. Like he was just like, what is the purpose? Like, sure, I can grow my business, but like I have everything I need. And he kept like confusing want and need. I could see that he was not allowing himself to like want anything. And people were just like, just move to a different country. And he was like, the only people I feel connected to are like my twin brother. And he's like here. But they were like, yeah, but if you move to a different country, like I was just like, wait, what are these people? Like the advice was just so like, I just felt like everybody's advice was like for themselves and not like truly like hearing him. And I just like finally put a message in the chat because I couldn't get myself to speak, even though I felt the sensation like in my chest where it's like, that's the time where you need to see something. I was like, are you maybe confusing the concepts of like wants and needs? Like, did you maybe grow up thinking that you're not really allowed to like want things for yourself? And he just like wrote back in all caps. He was like, oh my God. Like, he was like, Sarah. I was like, okay. And it was just so funny because it was like one of those times where I couldn't speak up for whatever reason because I was surrounded by a group of like men probably. And the energy was very different. But yeah, it was so interesting because it's like the more you listen to that stuff, it's such a knowing. A knowing is the right word, I think, to describe it because I don't know what else to call it really. Listening to that knowing and becoming more confident and just like putting yourself out there when it shows up. I don't know. It's been kind of a game changer for me, really.
Yeah. Probably for like a lot of people, you know, that you have connected with and that have been on the receiving end of that. Like I know I've been on the receiving end of people's knowing before and it's been so valuable. Actually, any therapist I've ever worked with, I would start off when we start working with each other, I would say, I really value and appreciate all your like knowledge from your studies and everything that you've done. the thing that's the most important to me is when you get an intuitive like download or like hit or a knowing that you're feeling in your intuition. I was like, please tell me those things.
That's amazing. What an empowered place to come to, or to interact with a therapist in that way. I don't think a lot of people would feel comfortable saying that to a therapist, because it's kind of like, it's like encouraging an authority figure. I mean, if we're going like real old school, you know what I mean? Like, because people think of doctors as like separate.
Sure.
To almost act in a way that might even be conflicting with like what they were taught.
Yeah, definitely.
I love that you do that.
Yeah. Yeah, because like the truth is like at the end of the day, if I'm getting just regurgitated stuff from their studies, I could go fucking get that information anywhere. But what I can't access anywhere is this specific person's experience of the world and their connection or reaction to what I'm saying to them and their intuitive like response to that. That is unique. And that's what I want. I want that unique, one of a kind, intuitive download. I mean, and honestly, like and it's weird for me because I have such an aversion to some of the stuff that I experienced as a child and how weird and confusing that was to me. But I still, to this day, I will experience, the only way I could refer to it is like a download, right? Where I get information that's like coming at me really rapidly about somebody else or about a circumstance. And when it happens to me, I like notice it in a big way. And it's like really intense. Like my whole body will like, I'll like shiver. Like it's like really wild. And it doesn't happen often, but when it does happen, I even feel weird talking about it because I feel like I think I'm afraid of being like judged for being like crazy or something like that. But the truth is it's like so noticeable when I'm getting this download of information that's like coming through me that I don't even really feel like it's not something I'm thinking and creating. You know what I mean? So
right. I
don't know what that is. So if anybody knows what that is, send me an email. Help.
I just think, I mean, for me in like talking about this, I think of myself like 5 years ago, and I wish I could just go back and be like, be more open, dude. It's so much better over here. You don't have to like worship crystals.
Right.
You don't have to. I mean, then there's the whole the people who like fully identify with all of their like labels that come out of like astrology and human design and Enneagrams and Myers-Briggs and like that, like taking it, you know, because that was another thing that was like, oh my gosh. And these people are like, I am an Aries. And I mean, it took me so long. I was so resistant to it. It was actually like a big deal for me when I started sending you memes about Aries. I'm an Aries. Because I had so much of me was like, absolutely not. I will not be one of these astrology people. But once I like let myself go there a little bit, I was like, this is actually really fun. And it's giving me new ideas and perspectives. And I don't know. I don't change my life based on like Mercury retrograde. I don't like change what I'm doing. But to allow myself these fun tools has definitely given me the ability to kind of just think about myself in different ways. And it's brought like awareness of like even how or why I do certain things.
Has it brought like a sense of like just like self-acceptance? Like, oh, I'm different in this way. And that's just because I'm different. Like, I feel like especially human design for me helped me notice things and patterns about myself. None of this stuff has taught me something about me that I didn't already know. All this stuff just it almost like points like, oh, this is a characteristic and that's normal. And all of it's like, yeah, I have all of that. It's not been like creating something that I haven't already had an experience. It's just like kind of defining or looking at those things.
Yeah. It's also, especially with human design, I think, because I'm a manifesting generator, I think it's given me permission to play with the idea of manifesting, which honestly has been one of the wildest like experiences of my life, because there have just been so many crazy situations that have come from me even giving myself permission to play with that. I mean, the stories are endless. You've seen some of it. You're like, and you'll remind me. You'll be like, look, this is the thing you want. Just ask for it. You know what happens when you ask for things?
Yeah.
Like,
just like literally
say it out loud.
Get specific. Ask for it. Yeah.
And then it like happens. And I'm like, damn, that's fucking crazy how that happens.
And I think your approach of like really lighthearted playfulness is really important, because people like, I think there can be like a huge fear response, especially if you had a childhood similar to mine, or if you grew up like having stuff like this like demonized. There can be a resistance because of fear, and because of the fear of the unknown. I don't understand this. I can't explain it. So I'm afraid of it. Right. That's like quintessential being a human, and having like playfulness when approaching it. And then the other side of things is people can get really dogmatic with it, and it can become just another repressive tool. It can go too far. And I think that's besides the point. You know what I mean? I think at the end of the day, and this is my approach to all the things, is that I metabolize, digest whatever it is that I'm learning about or thinking about. And I keep the things that resonate, and the things that don't, I let it go.
Totally.
You know?
Totally. For me, it wasn't a fear of the unknown, though. I think it was just to like, because I'm sure other people relate. For me, it was like based in like some sort of like arrogance, actually, and self-righteousness. I mean, the belief is like this, or for me, it sounded like this. It was like, I am a scientist and I am relatively intelligent, and therefore I cannot participate in this because it's ridiculous. Like that's what it came from. It came from like, and that I think is definitely where like a lot of men I've talked to come from, where they're like, that's silly, you dumb girl.
Right. Totally.
And yeah, I mean, like truly, you dumb girl. And that I think is it's so narrow-minded and so limited, and it's so, and like just the people who will not acknowledge the limitations of science blow my mind, like really, because they've in my opinion, they've made science a religion. They've made it like dogmatic. They've made it their like all or nothing, and that is the standard by which everything is measured. And they're so limited because they're not acknowledging the constant change and evolution of science. Like, I'm just like, it just seems so like obvious to me. I'm like, you're literally doing the same thing, but with another tool. Yeah. That you're doing the exact same thing that you criticize in people, or you judge, or you like feel like is silly, but with another tool. Yeah. That's how I feel about people who are like obsessed with science. I would have been so scared to say that out loud. Not even that long ago, 5-6 years ago, I would have been terrified to say that out loud. Because that's like what's hammered into you in the science world. Scientists tend to think of themselves as more knowing. It's a very self-righteous like world, actually. Yeah, more sane, more rational. And people who exist outside of that are ridiculous.
Sure. Crazy. Yeah.
Crazy, ridiculous. Women. Emotional.
There is this whole idea, if you're going to zoom out and look like thematically at some of this stuff, there are like these contrasting but complementing, I think, energies of the more masculine, pragmatic, logical, science-minded part, which isn't a gender, it's just an energy, right? And then the intuitive, mystical, like receptive parts, right? Feminine parts. And my whole belief of these like two counterparts are that like we need to cultivate both of them within ourselves. Like, and you tend to lean one way or the other, you know,
I tend
depending
to lean
on
masculine.
You tend to lean masculine. I tend to lean really feminine. And I've been on a huge journey to cultivate like a more pragmatic masculine energy in my life. And for me, that looks like making money and like business stuff and like, you know, whatever. Stuff. And we exist in a world run by men And
Yep.
so this one way of thinking is celebrated, right? And rewarded. You know what I mean? You have prestige. You are a respected person. And then this other part is not understood. And so it's repressed and dismissed and everything. And my understanding is that emotional feminine intelligence is equally as powerful and as real as a scientific masculine rational intelligence.
And that's
right?
it. That's literally it. You just like described like everything. I don't know. I guess the point of like where I wanted to go with all of this is because I think that I really thought of all of that stuff as like weakness, out of control, overwhelming. And it's all from just growing up and witnessing my parents. And it just seemed like I just always thought that like some of the more like, again, we're talking about some very stereotypes here. But the things that exist in what would be maybe considered stereotypically the like more feminine realm or whatever, I just saw it as like weakness. I didn't see the value in it until truly my friendship with you. And that's the thing I like constantly am trying to explain to Ben about it all is I'm like, I was so narrow-minded and one-sided and I was missing so much richness in my life. By existing so much more in that other space. And as I've opened up to just the more of the unknowns, more of all of this, like truly my life has gotten better and my experience has gotten better and things have felt more lighthearted and playful and enjoyable and the value of it is huge. And it's so hard to articulate. It's so hard for me to articulate. And that's something I like really appreciate about you is you've existed so much in that world that I'm like, help.
Say the thing.
Tell me things.
Yeah, it might be worth like, I don't know, just briefly touching on, because that begs the question, why? Like, why do we view like, and we'll just say the feminine and we're representing mysticism, emotional intelligence, all those things.
Yes.
Like, why do we view that as like weak and less than and is disregarded? And I really like, obviously
the patriarchy.
Right. Many schools of thoughts here, but with the advent of the agricultural age, when we went from having more equality in a tribal hunter-gatherer setting between men and women. And then we went to like owning land. And then when it came to owning land, when we as a culture, as humans moved into owning land and working on land, that's where the ownership of women came into place because men needed to pass down what they owned to their children and they needed to know who their children were, right? And so in order to ensure that these are their children, they had to own the woman. And that started this whole process of really repressing women because then it was women needed to be controlled because they needed to be owned because they needed to ensure this lineage of whatever. And then bring the church into it and all the things and you're burning witches at the stake. And there has been millennia of fear of this feminine counterpart because it's incredibly powerful and it's not understood and hasn't been understood. And it doesn't actually fit into this model of this patriarchal society we live in. It doesn't work. This works when the feminine is small and quiet and repressed. Even in our lifetime, like the massive shifts and it's incredible and so important. And it's going to be so good for men, the masculine and the feminine, for all of us. And I think like bringing it back to how can you integrate more balance into your life and how can you do it with playfulness and curiosity, noticing, do you have judgments? Do you have fear around certain one of these things? Or are you very much in the feminine energy, but you've been repressed? And so it's coming out in like really like heartbreaking ways, you know, because it's not seen or validated or heard. That expression of the feminine, I think, is the part that maybe you felt criticism around because you're like, that's
totally.
Right. But it was a repressed version of something I think that's incredibly sacred and amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a little bit of a tear.
No, I loved it. I loved it. I think, though, that for anyone who is hearing this, and I don't know, because it's two different ways of, we're very different in this area. And I really just like love it because it's such an important contrast for me. Because as I have pushed back on my tendency to judge that part of myself, I have opened up a whole world of thoughts, exploration and thought, and also wisdom, quite frankly. Like there's like the intuition that we were talking about earlier, the knowing. I have so many examples of me ignoring that, and it only resulted in pain. Where it like was a big feeling. And I just like, as I've gotten older and through these kinds of conversations, now when it comes up, I am at a place in my life finally where when whatever that knowing is gets kicked up, I am now comfortable being like, I don't know why. I can't explain it. And I'm okay with this, but I can't like go down that path. And I have no idea why, other than like something, a knowing is like showing up and being like, don't fucking go that direction. And I'm just so grateful for that because it's so hard to articulate, but it's like one of the most important things I've like worked on in the last few years is just like saying, like not needing a list of reasons, right? To go down a particular path. Like again, if that knowing shows up and is like, don't go that way, I can just say, I don't know why, but I'm not doing that because it's like big and important internally. And like, that's all I've got.
Yeah.
And I've literally like said that to Ben, and he's actually gotten to a place where he has, I think, a little bit more respect for it. And I'm just like, I don't know, but
that's huge.
It is. It's so hard to articulate. I'm really struggling to find words, honestly.
No, I think you're doing a great job because it's something that we're still trying to understand, I think, as a culture or remember. Actually, I feel like there was like a lot of intelligence about this in past times, but the whole bit that you touch on like the needing to like explain and justify and make everything make sense. That's masculine energy. Feminine energy is abstract. It's amorphous. You can't put your finger on it, but it is so valuable. And I've spent a lot of time filtering or making my feminine fit into masculine and have to explain it and justify it till I'm blue in the face. And I'm like, fucking done with that. And it feels really good. It feels really liberating to just be going into that inner landscape and building that trust like we were talking about. Yeah. It is hard to talk about this stuff because it's really abstract, but I feel like people are going to resonate with this shit. Like we all are experiencing these parts, and we all have relationships with them. We've all made judgments or have views or perceptions around masculine and feminine or these two energies. And I think getting really clear about what it looks like in you is like really good place to start.
And that I think is the important thing, right? I think the work or whatever is everyone has to figure out what that knowing feels like for them, because for a long time I couldn't distinguish between the knowing and fear. Like I would be like, I think I'm just being a puss. I think I'm just being a big old wimp. And really it was not that. It was like the knowing or whatever being like, yo, pay attention, this is no good, run the other direction immediately. And I'd be like, nope, it's fear. And so I would just like trudge along against all like signs and end up in a bad place, honestly. So I think that's the work is like, I mean, it's just self-awareness work, really. The more self-awareness, the more you pay attention to the signs in your body, because mine shows up so physically. Each time it happens, being like, okay, I fucked up that time. That was actually fear. Or I fucked up that time. That was my intuition like screaming. For me, that feels like where the work is to like distinguishing between the two. And it's very personal. Yeah.
It's this question. Does it make you feel big or small? Because your intuition's always going to be an expansive feeling.
Such a good question.
And fear makes you feel small. but that is going to feel unique to each person. But that's like a good way to get some clarity around it, because you might have an intuitive hit, and then you might say, does this make me feel big or small? And the actual intuition makes you feel big, but you have fear around going and talking to this stranger.
Right.
That's a fear to push through. Right.
Right.
And so, yeah, man, the nuances, but yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love this. I also feel like because this is all becoming more mainstream, vocabulary around it is expanding.
Yeah.
And I'm excited for that. I'm loving it.
Yeah, we need more words.
We do need more words. I'm really like noticing right now. I'm like, man, I need more words. I need more words to describe the things I'm like feeling right now. But I just think it's only going to continue that direction. It's awesome. I'm here for it. I would be burned alive as a witch for sure. You for sure.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah. Like as a long time ago would have been. Yeah.
Drop us anywhere in the past.
You would have been dead way before I would have been dead.
I would have been in like I would have been like banished to the countryside, I think. You would have been burned alive.
I would have been like burned as an example.
Yeah. I remember like being in high school and reading stories of like Virginia Woolf, or just like these like women like authors or like writers and minds that were just like banished to the countryside for being just to themselves. And I always would be like, that would have been me for sure. I would have definitely been like, what's the short story with the wallpaper? Do you know what I'm talking about?
That one. Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I remember being like
the yellow wallpaper.
And people think and I think some people think she was struggling with postpartum depression or something.
Right, that's what people say. Charlotte Gilman.
I remember reading that and being like, I can see that in my life. Like I just remember relating to it. And I don't know that was the point of the like short story. But I just always saw myself in the like insane, quote unquote insane women of the past. I was like when she like Virginia Woolf like put stones in her pockets and just like walked into the river, I was like, legit.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't like, oh my gosh, that's so shocking. I was like, makes sense, checks out. I feel that. I feel that big time. Yeah. Well, I'm grateful to not be living in a place where they burn witches. I mean, other horrible things happen, but here we are.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Yeah. To be in a place where it is an amazing time and everybody can have a voice. Everybody can have a voice here. On social media, on the internet, on the podcast. Yeah. Yeah. Here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where we are living, which brings it back to speak the thing, say the thing. Yeah. It'll help us all grow.
We need it. We really do. I'm a big believer in that. That's why we're here. Help us with vocabulary, please.
Yeah. Okay. Help us, people.
Oh, well, I love you.
I love you too.
I didn't see the resistance around being called a mystic coming about in that conversation.
Interesting.
It's very interesting to me.
I know. It was interesting to me too. I think I have some aversions, like, because I don't ever want to convince anybody of anything. Like, or maybe that's not true. There's some things I like to convince people of, but this is not one of them.
Right. So you don't want to be seen as dogmatic around it.
I think I have a huge aversion to that because I hurt so bad because of that. And I know I hurt people in that world because of that, like friends and things like that. And I just, I don't ever want to come across that way, but I do see there's so much richness, like you were talking about, and there's so much value in exploring these things. And, and I think the thing that you kept touching on is just like being playful and curious and lighthearted about it, not over-identifying or making anything really, really heavy. Like when people over-identify with like
that's like
their
an
astrology,
podcast I want to talk about. I want a whole podcast on over-identifying with like the new age labels because it blows my mind, especially because I see so many of those people are in the world of like personal development, right? Because I feel like it all kind of like somewhat goes hand in hand. And they're just like creating their own self-limiting beliefs. And I'm just like, what? Don't you see what you're doing? It just seems so obvious to me. Anyway, next time.
Yeah, sure. We've got more podcasts to do. Who'd have thought?
There's so much. There's so many like different like threads you can follow in the same conversation.
Totally.
And that's what I love about this shit. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
I love you.
I love you. Until next time. Bye, guys.
All right. Bye.